The Oregon Trail looms large in American history, mythic in its promise, yet brutal in its demands. Stretching through plains and mountains, it tested every traveler's resolve, leaving behind stories of resilience and heartbreak that still spark our curiosity today. Number 9. Lasting legacy and the trail's imprint on the American West. By the 1880s, the Oregon Trail's golden era was over, largely because of emerging railroad lines that made travel quicker and safer. Yet, the wagon tracks still scarred the land, forging a permanent testament to the largest voluntary migration in U.S. history. These ruts became an iconic emblem of courage, sacrifice, and the unyielding push of a nation determined to expand its reach. But those marks in the soil also hint at a deeper tale of environmental upheaval. Soil packed so hard nothing would grow, riverbanks so eroded they permanently changed local ecosystems, and bison herds driven away from ancestral ranges. Countless men, women, and children claimed farmland in Oregon's fertile Willamette Valley, laying the foundation for future agricultural success. Others struck gold in California or found religious sanctuary in Utah, each group layering new cultures and values into what had been a relatively untamed region. The roles of outlaws and lawmen expanded as more permanent settlements popped up, each settlement attracting merchants, ranchers, and those seeking to enforce frontier justice. Native American communities, however, felt the profound impact of the unstoppable influx, facing displacement and dramatic cultural changes. Meanwhile, the fascination with the Oregon Trail persisted. Historians like Ezra Meeker, who crossed it multiple times via wagon, train, automobile, and even biplane, tirelessly campaigned to preserve the trail's memory. His Meeker markers commemorated key points along the route, and his public lectures galvanized interest in safeguarding the story of the Old West's largest wagon migration. In modern times, road trippers can still see physical reminders: deep wagon wheel ruts scarring the earth, stone inscriptions left at Independence Rock, or historical markers that pay tribute to fort sites once bustling with commerce, fear, and excitement. Enthusiasts study diaries and letters in archives, producing books, documentaries, and even popular computer games that keep the Oregon Trail narrative alive. This continuous retelling has woven the trail into popular culture, ensuring its place among the prime American Old West facts. Although overshadowed by legends of old Western outlaws, cowboys, and dramatic showdowns, the real drama of the Oregon Trail lies in ordinary families braving disease, heartbreak, and weeks of monotony, punctuated by moments of raw terror. Through unwavering perseverance, they helped shape new states and rewrote the map of a nation. In doing so, they left behind a living, tangible legacy, wagon ruts carved into the land, and stories etched into the American consciousness forever. Number 8. Graffiti on stone monuments as living history. Beyond wagon wheel ruts, the Oregon Trail left another intriguing imprint: carvings on iconic rocks like Independence Rock, Register Cliff, and Names Hill. These formations acted as natural bulletin boards for weary pilgrims who etched their names, hometowns, or small personal notes into the stone. Independence Rock stands out because thousands of emigrants paused near the Sweetwater River to camp, rest, and reflect. Some inscriptions are simple initials scrawled in haste, while others are elaborate signatures complete with dates, indicating an almost triumphant sense of having made it so far. A portion of travelers paid professional stonecutters a small fee to record their details more elegantly, ensuring their names would endure. Many used these etchings to reassure family and friends who might be following behind that they were still alive and well. Sometimes, notes included warnings or short messages referencing disease outbreaks, reported outlaw sightings, or advice about local tribes. These carvings turned into a collective diary, an unintentional time capsule, capturing the swirl of emotions, from joy to profound anxiety, that underscored the journey westward. The tradition of leaving one's mark mirrored a broader pattern among frontier adventurers, from mountain men to cowboys, who often left their names on canyon walls or old forts. For modern explorers or tourists, seeing these names up close is a visceral reminder that real people, with hopes, families, fears, once stood there. Although some inscriptions have faded, many remain legible. Preservation efforts aim to protect these carved signatures from vandalism or natural weathering. This graffiti, far from mere defacement, holds historical significance, testifying to collective endurance. It blurs the line between personal artifact and public record, illustrating how, in the Old West, each traveler wanted to assert, "I was here, and I survived." No digital posts or instant messages existed, so a name etched into stone became the loudest statement of presence one could make in a land that otherwise swallowed people's stories all too easily. Number 7. The churn of abandoned goods and camp sacrifice. The relentless drudgery of a 5-month voyage often forced travelers to discard possessions they once deemed essential. As wagon axles cracked or animals weakened, families shed weight, leaving behind everything from extra clothing to barrels of spoiled flour. Trading posts along the trail tried to capitalize on migrants' desperation, urging them to buy surplus items they likely didn't need. In Independence, Missouri, cunning merchants sold novices huge quantities of provisions, playing on their fear of running out of supplies. Within a few weeks on the road, many discovered they had far more than they could carry. Fort Laramie in present-day Wyoming became infamous as Camp Sacrifice because of the staggering amount of abandoned materials. During the gold rush peak of 1849, travelers racing to California's Sierra foothills threw aside wagon loads of heavy equipment rather than waste precious time. The detritus included bacon by the ton, cast iron stoves, waterlogged books, and even sets of fine china. The resulting chaos of broken wagons, half-buried barrels, and rotting food created a daunting landscape of misery for those following in their footsteps. Opportunistic scavengers, including certain outlaws, picked over these scattered heaps, collecting items they could resell or repurpose. Some local tribes also gathered metals and fabrics to use or trade. This endless trail of debris became an unwanted monument to just how harsh the route could be, reminding newcomers that the illusions of a comfortable crossing quickly gave way to the stark truth that traveling light was key to survival. Even the sight of these abandoned goods weighed on the morale of fresh arrivals who realized they might soon face the same dilemma. Those better prepared from the start had the advantage. Experienced guides warned travelers to pack only the most vital items and avoid being lured by traders into overbuying. Nevertheless, the cycle repeated year after year, weaving a cautionary tale into the very earth and shaping the collective memory of the trail's challenges. Number 6. Missionaries and the women who proved the journey possible. Early 19th century fur trappers and mountain men established rough pathways across the Rockies, but conventional wisdom at the time claimed that covered wagons, and especially women, could never endure such brutal routes. This notion shattered in 1836 when Marcus and Narcissa Whitman, along with Henry and Eliza Spaulding, ventured to the Walla Walla Valley. Narcissa Whitman's letters, describing everything from bison sightings to fording treacherous rivers, appeared in newspapers back east, electrifying readers who realized entire families could make the trek. Her successful passage marked the first time a white woman crossed the daunting Rocky Mountains, and it set a precedent that spurred the Great Migration. By 1843, Marcus Whitman led a wagon train of around 1,000 people, cementing the trail's viability for large-scale settlement. These missionary journeys did more than just open the gates for general migration. They reshaped cultural views of the frontier, challenging stereotypes that labeled the Old West as a male-only domain of cowboys and outlaws. Women, in fact, played essential roles. They packed supplies, gathered fuel, prepared meals, and nursed the sick. The courage they displayed when crossing turbulent rivers or climbing narrow mountain paths has often been overshadowed in popular narratives. Historians point out that women's diaries, though sometimes overlooked at the time, remain invaluable records of daily life on the trail. They document the emotional weight of leaving family behind, the heartbreak of losing children to disease, and the practical details of cooking over campfires in fierce prairie winds. Some letters even detail interactions with lawmen, describing how official notices were sometimes circulated through wagon trains to warn of specific outlaw threats in the region. The presence of families in wagon caravans also reduced tensions with certain Native American tribes, who were sometimes less inclined to see the travelers as strictly hostile when they saw women and children among them. All these nuances reveal that the path to the American Old West was not solely blazed by rough-edged men, but also by determined, faithful women who demonstrated that a life of devotion and perseverance could flourish in the frontier. Number 5. Branching destinations. Not everyone ended in Oregon, although the name suggests that everyone trekking the Oregon Trail ended up in the Willamette Valley. The truth is more complex. Out of approximately 400,000 immigrants who set out across the plains, many chose to break away at crucial junctions. The lure of California's gold rush diverted huge numbers onto the California Trail. This phenomenon surged especially after 1848, when James Marshall's discovery of gold at Sutter's Mill triggered a stampede of fortune seekers. That southern route, often dustier and even less hospitable than the northern paths, shaped a rapidly expanding population in California and paved the way for it to achieve statehood by 1850. Further east, the Mormon migration to Utah pulled tens of thousands onto alternative trails that converge near the Great Salt Lake. Seeking religious freedom and self-governance, these settlers followed Brigham Young's directives to build communities throughout the region. Along the same lines, side routes led adventurers, traders, and outlaws to emerging settlements in Nevada, Colorado, and Montana, each area offering its own enticements: silver veins, farmland, or strategic location for commerce. The diaspora splintered the main flow of traffic, producing a kaleidoscope of motivations and journeys. This branching out is emblematic of the Old West, not a single corridor, but a tangled tapestry of travel that laid the foundation for new territories and states. Merchants in towns like Fort Bridger thrived on the passing foot traffic regardless of whether travelers were bound for Oregon or the gold fields. Each route had unique challenges, from arid deserts to perilous mountain passes. For lawmen attempting to keep order, it was a daunting task. Multiple trails meant multiple opportunities for criminals to vanish into the wilderness. Native American tribes encountered an even more intricate patchwork of settlers, each with different objectives and levels of respect toward indigenous lands. Thus, the Oregon Trail represented only one strand in a broader migration that reshaped the entire American West, influencing everything from population patterns to local economies and forging new roads that ultimately spurred railroad expansion and the creation of modern highways. Number 4. The dominion of disease and medical shortfalls. The Oregon Trail teemed with every imaginable ailment, from minor injuries like snake bites and broken bones to devastating illnesses that wiped out entire sections of wagon trains. Cholera was the most notorious killer, flourishing in dirty drinking water and spreading quickly when large caravans camped too close to contaminated streams. Pioneers, huddled together along these water sources, unknowingly transmitted diseases at alarming rates. Proper sanitation was nearly impossible on the open plains. Latrines were shallow holes dug a short distance from camp, and unsuspecting travelers might refill water containers downstream. Dysentery, typhoid, and measles also spread with grim efficiency. Those afflicted often had no access to medical care beyond crude home remedies. Some emigrants carried medical books prescribing calomel or laudanum, but these cures could be as dangerous as the illness itself. Death could come swiftly and unpredictably. Improvised cemeteries dotted the trail, many with hurriedly fashioned grave markers reading, "Taken by cholera" or "Died of fever." Families sometimes had to bury loved ones along the roadside, worried that wolves or scavengers would uncover the bodies. In certain areas, the stench of illness lingered, prompting entire trains to detour around places rumored to harbor disease outbreaks. This invisible enemy struck rich and poor alike. No amount of planning or wealth could guarantee immunity. Such relentless epidemics caused even the boldest spirits to waver. Countless diaries reveal heartbreak, with mothers losing children or newly married couples burying spouses just weeks into the trip. Today, as historians scour these accounts, they grasp the crushing reality that disease overshadowed everything else, including the fear of encounters with outlaws, cowboys, or uncertain relationships with Native Americans. The Oregon Trail, legendary for its promise of prosperity, also became a corridor of anguish where survival hinged not only on grit and determination, but on luck in dodging the microbes that lurked in muddy creek water or unwashed cooking pots. Number 3. Native American encounters beyond the myths. Dime novels and old Western outlaws-focused films tend to exaggerate violent clashes between wagon trains and Native Americans. In truth, the greatest threat to most wagon trains wasn't warfare with tribes, but disease, accidents, or misfortune with the terrain. Many Native American groups along the trail, including the Pawnee, Shoshone, and sometimes the Lakota, were more likely to act as guides or trading partners than enemies. Over centuries, they had built an intricate understanding of local waterways, seasonal weather patterns, and ideal hunting grounds. They offered critical help by advising which river crossings were safest or where water holes might be found in the arid stretches of the high plains. However, tension did surface, especially as the number of emigrants mushroomed after the 1840s, fueling competition over bison herds and other resources. Some unscrupulous travelers exploited these encounters, suspecting any native camp of wrongdoing or worse. Skirmishes happened, but in far fewer numbers than frontier legends imply. The real tragedy emerged later, as massive waves of settlers devastated indigenous food sources, introduced new diseases, and established permanent homesteads on native lands. Meanwhile, a complex dynamic of trading posts and emergent forts dotted the landscape, further altering local economies. Lawmen rarely patrolled the wide plains, and unscrupulous adventurers might instigate violence, then vanish, leaving entire tribes or individual families to shoulder blame. Still, cooperation often saved lives. Tribes with deep knowledge of the region advised caravans on how to cross rocky passes or find routes that avoided certain bands of outlaws. Missionaries, too, sometimes bridged cultural gaps by learning native languages, though some aimed to convert indigenous people, which also led to conflict. The broader truth is that the Oregon Trail was shaped by intricate human interactions, acts of generosity, miscommunication, commerce, and occasional betrayal, rather than one-sided hostility. This nuanced reality reveals a deeper story that often goes untold in popular portrayals of the Wild West. Number 2. Why Conestoga wagons were left behind. In popular imagination, images of the American Old West are practically incomplete without the Conestoga wagon, large, boat-shaped vehicles that loom in countless paintings and Old West history documentaries. But historical records show that these massive wagons weren't the usual choice for crossing the Oregon Trail. Conestogas, designed for carrying heavy loads in the relatively smoother roads of the eastern states, were ill-suited to the rugged deserts and mountains lying between Missouri and Oregon. Instead, most emigrants traveled with smaller, lighter prairie schooners. These schooners were easier to maneuver around washouts, up steep inclines, and across rivers. Oxen teams proved more reliable than horses in these punishing environments, though some used mules because of their sure-footedness. Pioneers often coated wagon seams with tar, transforming them into makeshift rafts that could float across deeper streams. Despite this clever waterproofing, crossing rivers was still fraught with danger. One misjudged current could overturn a wagon, causing heartbreak as supplies, and sometimes lives were lost. The prairie schooner's Spartan interior meant that comfort was almost non-existent. Few had springs or any shock absorption, so every bump in the trail reverberated into sore backs and rattled bones. Consequently, many people walked beside their wagons, both to keep weight down and to spare themselves the misery of being jostled relentlessly. Shoes wore out quickly, sometimes forcing travelers to resort to leather scraps tied around their feet. Although the smaller wagon was more practical, it still had limited cargo capacity, compelling families to make tough choices about what to bring. Tools, seeds, and firearms took priority over luxuries such as fine china or heavy furniture. Overpacking led to frequent discarding of items along the route: iron stoves, trunks of clothing, even entire pianos. For modern visitors tracing the path, these abandoned artifacts, sometimes half buried in the dust, underscore how unromantic and grueling the actual crossing could be. And yet, the prairie schooner stands as an icon of American Old West facts, representing the realism of frontier travel, all function, no frills, but indispensable for the thousands yearning for a new life. Number 1. Shifting paths and the confusion of multiple routes. The Oregon Trail is often described as one continuous pathway leading from Missouri to the Willamette Valley, but countless diaries and historical documents reveal a far more complicated network of roads that meandered across vast expanses of the American frontier. Pioneers didn't always stick to a single route. They branched off for better hunting, water sources, or simply to avoid congested wagon lines that kicked up dust thick enough to choke both people and animals. These offshoots were called cutoffs, and sometimes saved weeks of travel, particularly in places like Wyoming. Yet the catch was that cutoffs were not always well marked. Fog, heavy rains, or scattered landmarks made navigation an intimidating gamble, and some groups found themselves disoriented for days in uncharted terrain. The unrelenting natural obstacles demanded adaptability. Some pioneers traveled in large trains, while others split off into smaller packs that felt more confident forging new ground. This constant branching forced leaders to decide whether to follow established wagon ruts or gamble on lesser-known shortcuts. Diaries record heated debates among families. Some insisted on the comfort of well-traveled paths, while others believed new routes offered a chance to outpace winter snows or discover extra grazing for livestock. The Oregon Trail essentially became a massive web with thousands of travelers leaving footprints in different directions. Outlaws also exploited the confusion of multiple routes, targeting smaller or lost caravans that had strayed too far from the main group. Lawmen rarely ventured into the wildest sections of the frontier, so splitting from the crowd carried risk. Still, the unstoppable spirit of westward expansion pushed settlers onward, forging alternative trails that would eventually become part of Old West history. The result, is that deep ruts crisscross the plain states, each set of tracks preserving choices made by desperate or daring immigrants seeking an easier or faster path. Over time, the entire system became a testament to frontier resilience, reflecting how quickly people adapted to unknown territory in pursuit of farmland, gold, or a new start in distant lands.